Why do I write? That's a question that I think every author eventually is going to get asked, or you might even ask yourself. I started writing in about 5th grade, but funny quick story before I even tell you about that. So when I was a kid, I almost failed 1st grade, 2nd grade, basically elementary school, because I didn't want to write the essays. And I'm talking about that little part in the LEAP test, or I guess if you're in Florida, the FCAT, or wherever you're from, it's called something else. But it's where you they just want to know, look, a little paragraph story about something like, tell me a story about da 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 da. I would skip that because I was like, who the fuck? I didn't say that as a kid, but I was like, I don't want to write. I don't want to write. I didn't like writing. And then when it came to books, like reading, I almost failed reading too because I didn't want to read any books. Like, you could bring me, if you want to give a mouse a cookie, I read that. If you want to give me like Junie B. Jones, I read that. But like, I'm trying to tell you guys, chapter books, anything longer, anything that didn't have big words and pictures, or mostly pictures, I didn't want to read it. I was like, oh, this is too long. I hated reading and I hated writing. So what changed? How did I end up writing 33 books? Oh, and they are not short books. They are like, if you've seen my writings on Microsoft Word, they are no less than like 100 to 300, 100, 250 pages on Microsoft Word. Typed up, that's well over like 180,000 words per book, usually. And no kidding, I'm not joking. What changed? The first chapter book I ever read was called My Evil Twin by Thomas McKean, and it took me forever to finish the book. Anybody knows the book? It's not that big. It's kind of that thick, but it was my first chapter book. I had found it in the basement of my stepdad. I had found it in the basement of my dad's girlfriend at the time's house, and I was just like, oh, this looks kind of cool. But dude, it took me like 3 months to get past the first page because like there was no pictures. It said chapter 1, and I was just like, oh my god, it's gonna take forever. But once it did take about 3 months to actually get started on it, like past first page. But once I started, dude, I was hooked. The premise really fast and very butchered because it's out of print. It was about this kid named, let's call him Jonah Jameson. And he was a nerd at his school. He had like clean cut hair. He wore like, jeans with a belt on, t-shirt, whatever. And he was a nerd. And then one day he finds out he's getting transferred to a new school in a new town. So he messes his hair up. He rips his shirt. He cuts his jeans. And he's instantly cool. Everybody loves him. Everybody likes him. They're like, oh, you're so cool. What's your name? Oh, my name is Jameson John. Right? And so everything's going good for him. Like, he's living the good life. And then one of his best friends from his old school comes to this school. He's like, hey, Jonah, how are you? And they're like, Jonah? And he's like, oh no, dude, that's my twin brother. So then the next day he comes up to school, he fixes his hair, wears a clean shirt, wears the belt with the jeans, and he's going to school with his best friend. And everybody's like, oh, who are you? He's like, oh, I'm John. I'm Jameson's brother. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. So then you already know what's going to happen. The personalities start getting mixed together. The spiky hair starts wearing the clean shirt and the boot jeans. The flat hair starts wearing the ripped shirts and the ripped jeans. And eventually it gets to the point where they're like, who are you? This is the very end of the book. They're like, who are you really? And he says, JJ. And I thought that was funny. I laughed so hard. I did butcher that premise, but that's basically it. Like, it's called My Evil Twin. And that got me into reading. So the next book I read was actually Blood and Chocolate. It was about werewolves. A girl worked at I think it was like a chocolate factory. She was a werewolf and she falls in love with a human, and that's forbidden because werewolves hunt humans. And they basically forbidden romance, love story. After that was Beautiful Creatures, which is, if you haven't read that, Beautiful Creatures is an amazing series by Cami Garcia, and I forget the other one, but I loved Beautiful Creatures. That was like, instead of vampires and werewolves, it was witches and incubuses. Yeah, witches and incubuses, which is really good. Very good twist on the whole vampires and werewolves instead. Another love story. But that got me into reading. So once I was reading those 3 books, I was reading The Hunger Games. I read Harry Potter, all of the books. I read Maze Runner. I didn't like how that ended. But that was the part. That's what got me into reading. And the reason I bring that up, the reason why I'm bringing it up with why I write is because you can't write books if you don't read. You have to read, not just, and they specifically say read the genre that you're writing. But if you've seen my books, the Shinry series, I've done romance, I've done action, adventure, past, future, otherworld, underworld, heaven. I've done it all. So I love reading different genres. As long as it gets my attention, you got me hooked. As for writing, the first time I ever wrote was in 5th grade, and I was inspired by, at the time, it was Samurai Jack, Duel Masters, Pokemon, Beyblade. I think that was it at the time of me starting writing. And so I created a character. I took the Samurai from Samurai Jack. I took the Shobu from Duel Masters, and I made Shobu Samurai Project Aryoku. Actually, I think at the time it was just called Shobu Samurai. And it was, Dragon Ball Z. And it was 50 pages written, not typed on Microsoft Word. 50 pages written, I don't know how many words, but I was just going. I was just like, Shobu does this. And it was kind of like they were trying to find Dragon Balls, except it wasn't called Dragon Balls, it was called something else. They were like orbs. It wasn't the cosmic stone that it is now in Shobu Samurai Project Aryoku, but it was something similar to that. Like there was like these 5 stones, they had to get them. Shadow creatures were still involved. Shobu and Kokujo were still there. Haiku was there. I think the Saint Shields were a thing too. So much of the story is the same, just not all of it, and very, very altered. It was way shorter than it is now, way less development. And that was the first book I ever written. That was it. It was just like, that was done. That was cool. That was fun. I tried to make a sequel called Taketo was there too. And then I tried to make a sequel called Shobu vs. Taketo Fierce Battle. That was inspired off of Beyblade Fierce Battle, the movie. But that one, I barely got past 5 pages. I knew they were going to fight, and that's all I knew. But then we ended up leaving Louisiana, where I was born and lived. And we moved to Florida. And once I got to Florida, I met Dylan Lloyd, Justin Lloyd, and Kevon Taylor. Dylan Lloyd is the creator of Shinry Makai, Santa Kurai, and Makinu III. Kevon is the creator of Prince of Weapons, Sentakai, and Justin is the creator of Logi. And so what I did was I was like, you guys have cool characters. Dylan came up with the idea of Kanjuis. Dylan came up with the idea that Shinry was a shapeshifter. They were basically like aliens or mutants. I don't think we ever established what exactly they were. I made them aliens. I think Dylan just had maybe they were mutants. Justin had that Logi was like a flame controlling person, and then Kevon Sentakai, he knew he was a Prince of Weapons because he used ninja tools and stuff like that. So after that, I was like, I have a character named Shobu Samurai. And we used to just go outside, we'd grab like these long sticks and we'd just fight and clash and stuff like that. And we just pretend like we had adventures. We were probably 14 at the time. Yeah, because when the time I wrote Shobu Samurai, I was 11. And by the time I met them, I was 14. So, we were still young. So then I came up with the idea, I was like, bro, Shobu should fight Shinry. But it's not just going to be about a fight, because I already knew I wanted to do that. But I was like, they're going to have adventures. We need to bring Logi in here. We need to bring Sentakai in here. And I started writing this in, Shobu vs. Shinry was the first book I wrote in 8th grade. And, bro, the ideas just kept coming. Because by then, One Piece was out, Bleach was out, Naruto, Shaman King, Zombie Powder, Zatch Bell. I was reading so much anime and manga that there was so much new material that I was inspired and drawn from. I was like, oh my god, dude, there's so many cool powers and abilities. And so that all accumulated into Shobu vs. Shinry the Sword of Light, which is mostly what it is now. If you read Shobu vs. Shinry the Sword of Light, few little changes, but it helped me figure out like plot, character development, character profiles. I was just going. And then it came 10th grade, I was working on Shobu vs. Shinry 2. Still no like set plan, but I knew it was called End of the Dread Zone Tournament. I knew it was going to lead to a bunch of fighting. I was going to bring back some recurring villains. And then by the time I was in 11th grade, we did Shobu vs. Shinry 3, Arado the Legendary Kajumi Master. And that's what took it off. Once those 4 books were done, Shobu Samurai, Shobu vs. Shinry the Sword of Light, Shobu vs. Shinry 2, Enter the Dread Zone Tournament, and then Shobu vs. Shinry 3, Arado the Legendary Kajumi Master, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I was like, this is fun. And I'll have to make a part 2 to this.